Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everything Life Coaching. I am Noelle. I'm one of the founders of Lumia Coaching, and with us today are two of my favorite people, Juliann and Karyn, who are both MCC level coaches and jazz hands all day. It's such a huge accomplishment. And also who are beloved instructors at Lumia and dear colleagues and friends. So Karyn and Juliann, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I want to kick the ball over to each of you to tell us where you are in the world, who you are in the world, and just anchor us into our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start. So I'm Karyn Edwards. I live just outside of Phoenix, Arizona, where it is beautiful this time of year. This is our bragging time of year. And my journey in coaching was I started off in corporate. So I spent almost 30 years in learning and development, organizational development, helping leaders with their talent, succession planning, all that type of thing inside organizations. And I got to a point where I thought, I've done this. I think I could probably do this on my own. I earned my PhD about 9 years ago in IO Psych, which is industrial and organizational psychology. And then I got my coaching credential, and I hung up my shingle. And Juliann and I go back, so we actually work together in a corporate setting and in different parts of the same organization. But that's how we got to know each other.
Yeah, and I'm Juliann Wiese. I also live in the Phoenix area. I'm in North Scottsdale. Very happy for the rain that we just had. Did you get any, Karyn?
We did. We got a couple, probably about an inch in our backyard. So that's
It's a big deal in the desert to get rain, so we talk about it a lot. Similar story to Karyn's in that I worked in employee development, leadership development, organizational development for 25 years plus, and my step into coaching really came because we had a lot of these big leadership development programs that were, the company was investing in them as a way of helping to grow the specific high potentials and, make sure that there was a talent forecast for the future. And what we found out is a lot of those big programs were kind of a one size fits nobody. And so our organization started to really think about coaching as a tool to support, much deeper and individualized growth in leaders. So when I left the company, I had done a lot of inside coaching and then decided to get my credentials. And in 2013, I started my own coaching and consulting business. And now Karyn and I do quite a few collaborations together, including one that's coming up for mentor coaching.
Yes, and this is so exciting. As both of you know, the ICF updated the core competencies November of 2025, and I was so excited to see that there was the dial really being turned towards the exploration of what it feels like inside to be a coach, how we're serving ourselves as individuals, how we can, use all of our senses to understand where we are in the world. And implicit in that is the need for mentorship and supervision. And so this is one of the pieces that the ICF is really serving up to coaches and saying, you will benefit from this. And I also just want to take a second to celebrate that you both recently achieved your MCC status. In the world of coaching, it's incredibly rare. I sat for a seminar with the ICF, I think last year, and the woman who ran the seminar was an MCC, and she was the only female MCC level coach in the entire country of Germany. And so I thought, wow, even thinking about the US and globally, it's an incredibly rare credential to hold. So congrats to both of you. That was a ton of hard work, and we're so lucky to have you as part of the Lumia family.
Thank you. I just want to say, we encouraged each other along, I think, through that process. Juliann started before me and obviously had way more time in position in terms of, I just started my business about 4 years ago. And so but I got very busy very quickly and was able to earn those hours. But yeah, there's about 50,000 or so coaches now with the ICF that have their credential, and they say somewhere between 4 and 5% have the MCC piece of it. So yes, it's kind of a big deal.
It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And I think thinking about how mentorship, and especially working with folks who have gotten to the levels of psychodynamic awareness that both of you had, can be so impactful. When did coaching stop being something you did and start becoming something that's really embodied who you are?
Hmm. Well, I'll start, Julianne. First for me, coaching sort of felt like a skill set, right? It was something, I went to the program at the University of Dallas or at Texas at Dallas, and I sort of was trying to switch on and off the skills, right? I was trying to learn the competencies, and so I empathize so much with people who are going through the Lumia program because it is a lot to try to incorporate. I didn't really understand what a coach was doing at first. I thought you were just giving advice and, hey, I've done all this stuff. That's great. That's mentoring or consulting. And there's certainly still an element of that in the work that I do. But over time, I noticed I didn't have to switch it on and off anymore. I had just started to integrate those skills, and I was asking questions deeper. I was listening. I was holding silence, even in my personal life. And so those skills just became part of my identity, and it really reshaped how I see people. And that's when I stopped practicing, and it just became how I show up.
That's awesome. Juliann, how
Julianne,
about
I don't know if you have a similar thought in mind or.
Yeah. What got stirred up for me when you asked the question, Noelle, was this sort of letting go of ego and performance. Because I do think, similar to how Karyn described it, right? There's all this, method and process and protocol and structure that we learn as coaches, of course, to get us, thinking about and exploring the themes that are necessary to help people. And I think I started to feel differently about who I was in the partnership, and it really came to I'm here really as a guide. I'm not really here with any kind of spotlight. And so when I stopped trying to perform in any way, it just became that much more fluid. And certainly I've seen, much broader and I think more sustainable impact for my clients because I let go of, trying to like show up in a certain way. It's now, as you use the word, embodied. And I think it has changed me just in everyday interactions with people, how I view myself in those interactions as well.
Yes, absolutely. I found in myself just a level of chill that has come about where you just really flow through conversation, expectation, and it's um it's a miraculous, I think, aspect of becoming a coach that we don't talk about enough, of how it really does change you in terms of the way that you experience yourself, the world, people around you, especially in terms of limitless potential, which is a blessing to be able to see that everywhere that we go. Um, Thinking about folks who are tuning into our podcast, it's our students at Lumia. A lot of folks use this podcast as a companion as they're going through coach training or their credentialing process, or as a companion as they're beginning their coaching journey professionally. And Karyn, as you shared, it feels a lot like you're playing a piano with two hands. On one hand, there's the competencies, there's a skill set, and then there's the entire other side of the coin where you're working and you're figuring out your business and you're figuring out the application of the competencies as you're building in your levels from ACC to PCC to MCC. What surprised you the most about your own journey through the credentialing process as you were building your business and really kind of, it's been a crescendo?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a lot to take on all at once, in all honesty. And so I'll be vulnerable. When I first finished my program, the program that I went through trained you at the PCC level. And so coming out of the program, I was determined that I was going to have my 500 hours and I was going to pass my exam and I was going to go on and, do great things. And I actually failed my first oral exam, which was just a huge gut punch for me because, I thought I had it all figured out and I was doing all these, and I do think I had some things figured out, but clearly not everything. So I think for me, it went from really learning about the structure and the process and the ICF and their standards and competencies and ethics and guidelines and everything, but going from doing coaching to being a coach, it is a big difference. And what that switch was for me was noticing the client. So I was really into the process. And so when I got rid of that internal checklist and really started noticing the client, is what surprised me the most about how much I changed in terms of being a coach. Around the business side of it, I think my biggest surprise there was just how much there is to do that has absolutely nothing to do with your website or your niche or anything, right? Learning the business of business and, how do you contract? How do you sell? How do you make sure you have a good accountant? All of that stuff. It was a big learning curve. And so I think you have to give yourself some grace and learn. And this is why Juliann and I are working on this mentoring program, is because we're working to blend those things together. Not only how do you show up and serve, clients, you have to have the teeth to do that kind of work, right? But you also then have to be able to run a professional practice. And those are two things that I know Juliann has a lot of background in as well, how she did it.
Yeah. And again, probably a similar story line here because we have, similar backgrounds in our corporate experience. I think the thing that surprised me the most is, you want to become a coach. I think a lot of people come to this work because they do feel like they can help others. And, supporting what you said, Noelle, which is finding that limitless potential. But what surprised me about it is that 94% of coaches have to expand their business beyond just one-on-one coaching. Like it's more, there's more here than being able to really have a singular sort of channel because if you want to grow your business, you have to get into the business side of it. You have to become a marketer. You have to be willing to put your voice out in the world and have an approach or a philosophy that you're willing to articulate and surface. So I think there's a lot broader requirement for coaches to be successful than thinking just about their coaching skills. And of course, I've had years where, coaching was way up and I've had years where coaching was way down. And I had to find, other ways of both, keeping myself motivated to stay in business, but also like, how do I keep growing as a coach and a practitioner? How can I make sure that I'm not, stagnant in the work that I'm doing? So there's a lot to it. And I think that's why Karyn and I really want to help other people is, now I've had 13 years, she's had 4 in this space, lots of hard learning for me along the way, some hard knocks. And I think we want to help people maybe have some that are a little softer.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. And two things jumped out for me about each of your shares. One was the importance of having a mentor or guide through the business of business. And then the other was really honing in on your voice, your philosophy, who you are in the world. Um, when students first come into Lumia, I always encourage everybody to slow down because there is a lifetime ahead of you of engaging with this discipline and thinking about where you could possibly go with it in the world. And I know that a lot of people, when they come in, are asking the question, well, how do I make money? How do I do this as a job? And when we're looking at the now almost $8 trillion wellness sector, one of the spaces where coaching is, I think, most recognizable is in the corporate space, which is titled workforce wellness. And on my end, I'm seeing an influx of platforms being built to serve, as benefits, serve benefit packages for huge corporations. I'm seeing different niche practices come about, where folks are moving into different corporate spaces to impact certain aspects of the employee experience, like new moms. And I'm seeing a lot of folks who have really deep experience in corporate life who are coming out of it for one reason or another and saying, this was really toxic. And I want to go back in as a coach so that I can help, other folks have a better experience. And I think that, the reality of this work is that there's a lot of business to be had out there. There's a lot of opportunity for coaches, and marrying that business acumen, your philosophy, leveraging your network, figuring out the right place for you to work, who you are, who you want to be, is its own job, in a sense. So, thinking about what the two of you bring to the table as mentors, can you tell us a little bit about um, the benefit of walking beside folks who have done this?
Well, I think one of the first things that get a benefit from us is we're now we've been through the credentialing process. At least for me, I've been through it 3 times, right? Once unsuccessfully, twice successfully, and now we're up at the sort of pinnacle of this field. And so I think that makes us unique, a differentiator. And I also think the other thing is we've both worked in the environment that a lot of people want to work in. So we both worked in a corporate setting in the talent space, which are the buyers of typically of this type of service. So we know what those departments, how they run, what they're looking for, what kind of stressors they have. So I think you need to look at, what are the differentiators that make you suited for this type of work, whether you're going in it from a benefits perspective or you're going to go in it from a leadership and sort of the top tiers of successors. For me, the additional differentiator, and then Juliann, I want to make sure she calls out her background in neuroscience. But so I'm an IO psychologist, so I look at an evidence-based approach to understanding how systems and organizations work. And that, in addition to, the ability to use a lot of different assessments with that background, makes me credible in that space. And so you have to decide which parts of your background and experience are you going to leverage for the type of work that you want to get into. So Juliann, I know she's done a lot of work in that neuroscience and has a certificate in that as well.
Yeah. I have a certificate in applied neuroscience from the Brain First Institute. And I think the reason I got interested in that is because I think about when we talk about coaching, one of the major themes that shows up for me is it's hard to change habits. As adults, at least 50% of our day-to-day behavior is habitual, and much of that is subconscious. So we're sort of going about life, doing what we do, behaving the way we are, feeling the way we feel, saying the things we say, and it's a lot of it's rote. And to surface that and then be able to go, maybe I don't want to do these things, like to make it more deliberate and conscious and intentional is challenging. And when we understand a little bit about what's going on in the brain, it makes a lot more sense to people. So we could say also, hey, there's evidence to support why coaching is so powerful, why it can impact people in a way that not many other methodologies can. And when we understand a little bit about the brain, it does help a lot, right? It gives a lot of credibility to the work that we do and how we do it. I think the other thing that would be helpful for people to know is that, like I've been doing this a long time, 3 times the length of time that Karyn has. But I would say I've had a lot of trials and tribulations along the way. One, for example, is the first time I applied for my MCC, I didn't pass the oral either. And I have to tell you that when I found that out, it was a blow of like unimaginary proportion at the time, because I felt like, gosh, I put in 13 years of this and had been studying and working and lots of coaching hours, right? 2,500 plus coaching hours. And then having to go through the process a second time, the first few months of that was incredibly difficult for me. But I learned so much having to do it again. Now, when I look back, I'm so glad it happened, because the feedback that I got for why I didn't achieve that goal was exceptionally helpful eventually, right? Like when I stopped having my ego broken over it, and I looked at it more objectively. But to add to that, just the fact that I've been in this business, in this space for that long, survived the pandemic by making some pivots, sort of watched the industry change and grow, over that period of time. I think that one of the ways I really want to help new coaches is just to sort of make the journey for them more fluid. And so I do think that I can really help, along with Karyn's um, partnership, just to get people through so that they don't have quite as many bumps or obstacles.
I mean, that's the dream, right? That's the dream for all of us, is to have smooth and happy sailing, and prosperous and plentiful coaching opportunities. And as I'm listening to you both, what's striking me is, isn't this just the reality of long-term goal accomplishment? That there are bobs and weaves and ups and downs, and so many different chapters that give us riches that we didn't know they would yield. And as I'm thinking about the different spaces and places that folks go to when they say, I want to move into corporate coaching. Yes, it's the one on one. Yes, it's the business. It's our personal philosophy, who we are as humans. And then there's also the reality of the world, where you're in an organization with different people of all different backgrounds. There's behavioral nuance, there's power dynamics, there's executive presence, there's personal branding. And as coaches, those are pieces that we individually need to be aware of, and also be aware of for our clients, and understand the 360 environment. And when folks come to office hours, sometimes where I see the stuckness and the questions is, I don't know how to leverage this space between me being a coach, the client being the client, and then the stakeholder having their own expectations, and then there are all of these other personalities that factor into the equation of, the client saying, do you have any time management tools? And the coach is saying, I think it's a lot more than time management, but let's, ask some good questions. I know that both of you have an extraordinary amount of experience navigating all of that. How did that experience blend into how you structured your mentor program?
You want to go first, Juliann, on that one?
Sure. I may have to think a little out loud on this one. What comes up for me when you ask that question is this is one of the biggest challenges I have found is when you have a stakeholder who pays for the coaching, and then you have a client who is often told by the stakeholder, you're getting coaching. And as you described very aptly, Noelle, sometimes what the stakeholder wants and what the client wants are not the same things, and their expectations of what they're going to get out of coaching are different. And I found that almost always that's a train looking for a place to smash into. And we have to do a lot of things to help us change that dynamic. So, for example, when the stakeholder says, this is what I want to have happen, this is why we're getting this person coaching, one of the first questions that I ask is, does the client know that? Has that feedback been delivered in a very clear and frequent, consistent way so that when they come into the conversation, we are on the same page? And if I have an inkling that that's not the case, I would bring them together so that we can have a conversation with the three of us so that some of these things can get cleared up. So as far as where mentoring goes, I think this is what Karyn and I want to help people do is understand some of these challenges, some of these dynamics, and some of the pathways we've taken and found very helpful in trying to not have some of those challenges come up. Sometimes it's bad enough that I actually will refuse to do the work if we've got a big disparate sort of pathway in the minds of the client and the stakeholder. And in some cases, the stakeholder says, we want to get this person coaching, and the client says, who needs coaching? My boss, not me. Those are, they're just problems looking for a place to happen. And so I do think there's a lot of opportunity for us to clarify, here's some steps to take along the way when you have some of these challenging dynamics.
And I would just add to that, I think it's all in how you, to me, there's sort of like a bullseye, right? There's the in the center is the core relationship that you have with the client and the deep work that you're doing in coaching. And then you go out a layer and you have the direct leader, the leader of that leader, that is the stakeholder who is the one that's sponsoring that client. But they need to, you need to be very clear as a coach of what the different roles are that are in that coaching engagement, what the role of the sponsor is, what the role of the client is, what the role of the coach is. And then typically in a corporate environment, there's also the buyer, right? So that could be the HR group or the leader's leader. That also, and those are all that stakeholder management is extremely important in terms of how you set up what people should expect at the beginning. And so I find a lot of it is if you don't have a really good contracting process and explaining and taking the time up front to explain how coaching is going to evolve and what you're going to be working on. And also, again, going back to what is your differentiator as a coach? What are you there to do? What are you there to not do? How do you blend coaching and consulting? And knowing that the ICF is really more about we're getting credentialed in pure coaching. But a lot of times in a corporate setting, you're also doing some consulting. And so I always tell students that wrestle with this. Sometimes that's the resistance that I hear when I'm working with students is, this person just doesn't know. I need to just tell them, what they need to do. And I say, oh, that's fine, but you need to take off your coaching hat and you need to put on your consultant hat and be clear that which role you're playing. And the other thing is, learning non-directional coaching is something you have to learn. That's what the ICF espouses, is not telling
Karyn
people
froze for me
what
for a
advice or
second.
direction. But if you never learn that skill, it's like a light switch. You can't turn it on if you've never had the ability to never learned it. So you have to be able to learn that first, and then you can always go back. Everybody can give advice, right? But not everybody can coach.
Yes. And, the interplay that you're describing of the corporation, the goals of the corporation, the individuals who may be subject to coaching, the managers, supervisors, 2 levels up, the contract, the advocacy that has to take place up front, that requires a tremendous amount. First, I'd say bravery on the part of the coach to get used to and build their chops in just speaking truth, sometimes speaking truth to power, speaking truth when it's uncomfortable, differentiating between the ethics of your business and the sale, which can be terrifying, especially when you're out on your own in business, and the stakeholder relationships. These are all reasons why it feels really important to have mentorship as you embark on this journey. And thinking about coach training and the layers of your coaching credential, it is often so client focused, because folks are really learning how to run their craft within a session. And the piece that you both bring in that I think is just, I want to highlight because it's so important, is the contracting piece. And the ICF core competencies, as they've been updated, are really highlighting the importance of keeping that contract central to the coaching engagement throughout, and having those check-ins be an almost fluid aspect of it. Can you talk a little bit about how you support folks with the contracting piece?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the contract from a legal perspective, right? So you want to get your contract in order. The ICF has some freebies, as you get started, but as you build your business, you're going to want to get one that is specific to your organization. And so there's what the big C contract, right? That's the bigger one. And then there's us, all the things that you just described, helping someone with getting that bravery through experience. Okay, you're now going to talk to an HR person who's actually the person that's signing the contract with you. But there's a lot of questions that you haven't had answered. And I can tell you, and I know Juliann can too from experience, is you want to take the time and get all of the things set up in advance. And so working with us, we can tell you about the cost benefit of saying no to a contract, because it's going to take so much of your time and energy and effort later on to clean up things that weren't clear early on. And the emotional distress that you go through as a coach when things don't, turn out the way that you had hoped, or that everybody was on different pages and there wasn't clarity. So taking the time to get organized, we've both been there, we've done that, we've learned, and we can share that with folks who've never either have had limited experience or maybe have only been an internal coach, of what's different about that and why you might want to say no sometimes to certain engagements, even as hard as it is. And everybody's, trying to make a living and all that good stuff. But just sometimes you got to say no, it's not the right fit for you.
And I'll just add that the check-in piece is so critical. I have I think a couple stories that I often share in the mentoring we do with the Lumia students, Noelle, where I just talk about, sometimes the stakeholder, the buyer says, no, I don't want check-ins. I don't need a check-in until, of course, something comes up, and then now they want to check in, and they feel sort of in retrospect like, well, I thought you were going to be working on this. And of course, because our conversations with our clients are confidential, we can only ask that the client, do some reporting on how the coaching is going for them. And we can only report thematically, no specifics whatsoever, as long as the client knows in advance, hey, when we check in, it's going to be thematic. We're paying attention to all of those, very important ethical considerations. But at the same time, if the stakeholder or the buyer doesn't want to get sort of updates and check in, then, if things don't turn out exactly as they want them to, it feels like a hard knock, as opposed to we're tracking along the way and understanding the nature of what progress could look like and how it might evolve, and how we're also meeting the clients where they're at. And so sometimes, sponsor says, we want this person to be able to do X, Y, and Z, but we find out in the coaching session that the client's challenges start at a much deeper level. And so we're orienting at that deeper level. We're not at that behavioral level yet. So I do think it's important, as Karyn is saying, to have the chops to have a conversation with these buyers and say, it's very important that we are aligned and that we move in, a path where we're checking in, we're having conversation, again, in the confidential manner that's necessary, but also so that they aren't surprised by anything that may or may not happen as the coaching moves along.
Yeah, the work of setting up effective feedback loops is no joke. It is, its whole own art form. And I appreciate the complexity of it very, very, very much. And it's something that I think if I'm really zooming out and saying, all right, if we're thinking 20 years from now, what is going to have been the benefit of coaching impacting so many organizations during our time, because it's really ramping up, it would be the feedback loops, and it would be the sensitivity and the lens into what people are actually experiencing beyond these ideas of like, just make the humans do the thing, um, which I think is the old way that's hopefully ending as time marches on. Something that both of you said early on in our conversation struck me was that one of the things that propelled you both to the levels of mastery that you're at right now was the relationship with each other, and having that table to sit at with another smart person or other smart people and have these conversations around, well, what have you done? What has worked? How do you really do this? And kind of dumping the life Legos out and seeing what's there. And thinking about a mentoring program, I imagine that one of the most tremendous values there is for the people who come into the program to have that table to sit at and to have that partnership, not only with both of you, but with each other. So, what's it like in a cohort of group mentoring? What can people expect?
Yeah, I can start. Maybe I'll begin with one of the reasons why Karyn and I have successfully collaborated on many things is because we do meet with some degree of commonality, and we also, I think, have a really nice sort of blend of skills and ideas. Like Karyn, in my opinion, is very analytical and she's very detail oriented. She's like super smart and technical. And I think my skill set is much bigger picture. It's more of a vision and strategy, and she brings in this sort of deep psychological background, and I've got a background in sales that's also pretty significant. So I think it's just been nice to have a collaboration where we really don't overlap that much, just enough that we've got sort of a grounded foundation. And I think in the mentor sessions, first of all, the ICF has been really intelligent in making sure that they're small, right? No more than 10 people in a session. And what that allows is for us to give somebody the floor, let them talk about what they're experiencing, get some questions out, and for us to go deep into it. Whereas in the classrooms, often it's hard because we have content to deliver, and it's hard to engage in something that's super individual. Where the mentoring sessions really allow that to happen, and people hearing what other people are going through. It's incredibly helpful because a lot of them are afraid to bring it up, right? There's that a little bit of performance anxiety coming in and being vulnerable. I haven't made any headway on this, coaching business. I'm struggling to figure out who I want to be and how I'm going to market myself. And other, aspiring coaches are in that room hearing this and going, "Oh, me too." So I think the fact is we end up in a situation where people are feeling heard, they're feeling connected, they're feeling like their vulnerability is actually a superpower as opposed to something to be afraid of, because it illuminates so many places for Karyn and I to be able to support them through the conversation. And of course, they're all adding their own experience and all of their own wisdom into the conversation. So it is multifaceted, multi-dimensional, and I think it's one of the places where the ICF has really hit a home run by ensuring that certain number of mentor hours is a requirement of credentialing.
I also think because you have to do it over a few months, it's not all, you can't just do 10 hours in 2 weeks, right? It has to be spread out over 3 months from the ICF requirements. And everybody at every level renewing has to get these 10 hours every time you renew. So over 3 years, I did not realize that. I had mentor coaching in my program, and then I was like, oh, wait a second. And so I never actually have renewed. I've always stepped up a level. So I haven't actually, I had to get it for my MCC. But there's a couple things I would say is what I try to do, and I encourage others to do, is always surround yourself with people that are working at the level at which you aspire to be. So if you're an ACC or you're not credentialed yet, start working with an MCC, because you're going to be practicing at a different level than you would be if you surround yourself with other ACC level coaches, which is great, right? But the ICF clearly outlines what the performance and what the demonstration is like at each level. So that's one tip that I have. And so working with Juliann and I, you're going to hear feedback that is going to move you to the PCC and or WISPs of the MCC level, because that's our experience. That's the place in which we operate from. So I think there's a huge benefit to that. And coaches also observing, mentoring, and coaching at that level to other people. So not only the feedback that you get as an individual coach, but what you hear and learn from other people as they're going through the experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what comes to mind for me is how the existence of being a coach is such a layered and ongoing process. At Lumia, folks come in for essentials, which is the certification piece. You're learning the theory, the concepts, positive psychology, business fundamentals. Get into signature, and we're walking you over the bridge from learning to performance. And then it doesn't stop there. Even if you're staying at the level you're at, Karyn's right. You do need those 10 mentoring hours each time you renew alongside continuing education. And the new emphasis on the importance of mentorship feels to me like, beyond a learning space, it's really a personal workshopping space where you have the room to define for yourself in the company of other smart people, where do I need to go and who will I be when I get there. And that's the great choose your own adventure story of this work. Our students are so lucky that when they're first coming in and they're at the pre-credentialing level, they get to work with each of you as mentors in our program. And I know that you've taught thousands of students, mentored hundreds of students. What do you see as the biggest blockers, because you have such a data set that keep folks back both from mastery and from really making that leap in their businesses?
Juliann, do you want to start on that one?
No, go ahead, Karyn.
So I think what I see holding people back is this idea around resisting non-directive coaching. That I have to have the right next question, the most powerful question ever invented to respond. And I'm so in my head about whatever that is, that my presence evaporates. Right. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I see is coaching is partly, yes, there are demonstrated competencies, and that is something that you have to learn, which is why the ICF has the hour requirements that they have, because the more reps that you put in, the more you get rid of that performative aspect, and you're really demonstrating, is what I like, the word I like to use. You're demonstrating these competencies, but you don't have to be perfect at it. And so I think that's one of the bigger pieces from developing as a coach. At some point, you sort of have to put that shield down and just say, okay, I'm embodying a coach, and there are questions I'm going to ask that aren't going to come out perfectly, and that's okay. But I'm working towards that next level of demonstration that's needed. I think from a business perspective, this is. I mean this with all the love in the world, but I think the biggest issue I heard for a long time was people worried about their website. I have not gotten one piece of business from my website.
Me neither.
It's like a business card. You should have one for credibility, but don't put so much work. I mean, unless that's, I know some people are social marketing gurus, and maybe that's just not me, but I find that people spend an inordinate amount of time worrying about the tech stack that goes along with coaching, as opposed to mastering the competencies of coaching. Because in the moment, you got to have that down. Nobody's going to care about your website when you're face to face with a client.
Yeah. I would echo everything that Karyn said, and I'm gonna add to the business side because of my background in sales. Two things that stand out for me. One of them is, and you talk about this all the time, Noelle, right? That people come with the story, and then their story is gold. And so the way the person that's showing up, wanting to become a coach, they have to recognize that all of their life experience contributes to, how they're going to be in the world and show up. So when they start thinking about niches and selling and getting new clients, I think a lot of that stuff gets warped, and there's a lot of distorted narratives that exist about what that looks like. So one of the things I would always want to share with new coaches is that the network that they hold right now is the most fruitful ground for getting clients, not spending a ton of money on marketing and trying to get leads and all of that stuff. It's just noise in the background. There may be a time when in the future for coaches when some of that kind of marketing might be useful. Like, for example, if they start doing some workshops or other forms of this type of work. But the network that they hold now is the network that will support them the most. And so I do think that a lot of people sort of get caught by these bright, shiny objects of things going by them, thinking that that's how they're going to build their business. It's not how I built mine. It's not how Karyn's building hers. And I don't know any successful coaches who have spent a lot of money like on things like fancy websites or marketing, buying marketing leads and done well for themselves that way. So I think we really want to help people understand like where business truly can get generated, and where to put their time and effort. And if they are going to spend money on marketing, what does that look like so that they can get some return on investment for that?
Hallelujah. I mean, you're preaching to the choir on this one. Early on within the first 3, 4, 5, 6 classes at Lumia, I'm always saying to students, please stop with the logos, everyone. The logo is not going to get you where you need to be, nor is your website. And I spend a lot of time in office hours with folks thinking about that network. And I think where I catch people is at square one, because I think when folks are early on in coach training, they might even be intimidated by, well, do I have a network? Who is my network? What does a network look like? And so we start turning over the stones of, well, who are the people in your neighborhood? I do a lot of Mr. Rogers these days. Look for the helpers. Who are the people in your neighborhood? And really starting to generate these ideas around, well, yeah, all I need are maybe 5 or 6 people who are natural connectors, and they need to buy into what I have to offer, and I have to buy into what I have to offer before anyone else can. And it sounds like, I know a lot of folks tell me directly, I want to be Juliann and Karyn when I grow up as a coach. And so having a seat at your table will get folks closer to that. As we're finishing up, it's true, all of us who renew our credentials need this mentoring piece. Once we say these words out loud, we start getting targeted ads, and the world of coach noise is wild. So I'm a fan of real relationships, personal relationships. Everybody who's part of our community, who listens to our podcast, has met both of you before, talking about various wonderful topics. But when we're talking to, everybody, what really distinguishes your program from other programs, and what questions should people be asking?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that we are both working in corporate with corporate clients. So that's one of the things that's very specific about our program. It's not that we don't welcome people that aren't, or that wouldn't necessarily go down that path, but just know that that's where our background comes from, and we're going to be focused on how do you work in that type of environment. So I think that's a differentiator. I think the other thing you should ask yourself is, who is mentoring you? Right? What is their experience? At what level have they achieved? Because you want to make sure that the program that you're going into is at least a PCC, and ideally an MCC. So you've got two, you've got 2 of us in this first one that we're running. So ask yourself that question. I think, how much real world experience does your mentor coach have? And then, is it evaluation focused? Is it development focused? Are they focused just on getting you through the check marks that are going to get you the call oral exam, or are they really developing you as a coach? And we claim to do both, right? We will help you. I'm in the training process to become an evaluator, and so we have that extra insight on. Obviously, we can't disclose all of it for the ethics of holding those positions. But knowing that we have that experience, I think also differentiates us. So just how are you evolving, not just how to pass?
Yeah. And the only thing I have to add, Noelle, is that I've been an instructor with Lumia for 6 years. Karyn, how long have you been there now?
3, I think.
Yeah. So we've also, between the 2 of us, had just about every question that a new coach could asked. And not that we've all had, the 2 of us have had every definitive answer. We've had exposure to what's on a coach's mind, where the challenges come from, what they may be not saying that needs to be said. I think, you're right. It's thousands of students that I've had exposure to. And I've learned a ton from them. Also because they're all bringing their own wisdom and their own experience to the conversations, but because they're asking me questions that I have to then process through. And so I think because Karyn and I have had that really length and breadth of experience with new coaches, I'd be surprised that there are too many questions that we haven't been asked.
Yeah, I love that. And something I'm seeing on my end is that the questions keep evolving as the space. I think we're at this inflection point as an industry, and I track this obsessively. Pre 2020, most people had heard of coaching and thought, okay, coaching, cool. Post 2020, most people grew to associate coaching with developing the life you want to live, purpose and meaning. And most people on planet Earth have now said, I'd like to work with a coach one day. So this discipline is skyrocketing. And life is getting ever more complex, especially within the landscape of work environments. And coaches are being called in more and more. So we're just going to see this ballooning. And I think we're at a point in the industry where we all kind of need to hold hands and say, okay, let's catch everyone so that we can do the work that we intended to do when we set out on this path. Because I think that every single person who's ever wanted to become a coach has had a really personal reason for wanting to do so, whether it's your talent or your experience in life or the impact that you want to create in the world. It's deeply personal. So I love that a huge part of how we get people going is through mentorship, is through mentoring programs, and through really intentional groundwork to get people up moving and serving people ultimately. This has been such an awesome conversation. Thank you both. When does your next cohort start?
So we are starting April 2nd, and so we have an early bird pricing for Lumia that you'll see in the details through March 2nd. And yes, so we're looking forward to it. We only have 10 spots, so if you want to be involved, make sure you sign up quickly.
Yes, and where can folks find you?
Right. So we're both on LinkedIn, as well as we both have our own websites. So mine's abloomconsulting.com, and Juliann?
Mine is actually in the process of a refresh because my book is about to be published. And so once my book is out in the world, my website will be back online.
Awesome. And I'm excited for, Juliann 3.0 speaking gigs. Oprah, the whole nine. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. This was such I think a really important conversation, especially as people are asking the question, how do I really do this? And this is one really concrete, tangible next step that people can take to answer that question. So it's such a pleasure. And we will see you, of course, inside of our classrooms, but we'll see you next time here.
Thanks so much, Noelle.
Thank you.
Karen.